All right. All right, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm John DeBenedictis, Executive Director for the National Soccer Coaches Association of Canada. And welcome to another edition of Behind the Bench and webinars for our coaches around the world. And today our special guest is Glenn Crooks. And Glenn is the author of a new book called, and you can see it right here, Put It on Frame. Glenn is also a broadcaster for the New York City FC. Plus he covers numerous different, I think you've been covering the national team lately. But he's also coached. He's coached at Rutgers University. And I think that makes it unique where you've got a broadcaster who's not just played, but also coached. And so maybe, Glenn, you can give us a little bit more background about your career.
Well, thank you, John. First of all, Behind the Bench, that title, it's interesting because as a player, I was normally on the bench. So that would be a more appropriate title to this particular episode. And I'm sure you like the title of my book, Put It on Frame, with the certainly attacking players are certainly in mind there. Yeah, it's just one of those phrases I've trying to with my wife, who's an author, not a sports author, but an academic author. But she said, listen, the title of the book's so important. And she's heard me kind of yell that out or talk about it just in passing. She goes, you always say put it on frame. So, all right. Yeah, it's not a bad one because that's what we want to. I think.
So that's how you came up with the title?
Yeah. My wife, she's sharp with a lot of different things. So she's edited a lot of the book too.
Okay.
Because that's part of what she does. So, I tell you, it's been, I never thought about writing a book really until, and again, it's my wife, who's Dr. Mary Chayko, where these interviews, I've done over 1,200 interviews and they're radio interviews. So they're like, gone after they're done. There's an app and some of them are saved, but eventually they get deleted. Yeah. So I was lamenting, about this, all these interviews are just gone. I was almost so selfishly after she said, well, why don't you write a book? I thought, wow. And I checked out a couple of books. Howard Stern, for instance, has this book where all these people he's interviewed, he just does like Q&As with them, and that's his book. Now, that's Howard Stern. He's getting guests that are very famous both domestically and globally. Mm-hmm. So, you could open up. You don't even need to have those people defined. But I thought, I have all these interviews. I had the recordings saved. So once I started looking at the transcripts, John, I was like, wow. There really is a lot of good stuff here, but I was lamenting it's gone. I can't resurrect all of them, but I'm going to do 2 more volumes. Volume 2 is going to be released before the World Cup, and then Volume 3 before the Women's World Cup next year, and then that's probably it. And it's probably going to be 120 interviews all together. So obviously, I'm not getting close to the amount I've done, but
Right. Yeah. You've interviewed over 1,200.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, that's amazing.
Crazy. I've been retired from the college game since 2014, and I started the show, shortly thereafter. And generally it's 2 or 3 guests a week, and so I'm constantly doing interviews. And one day I just sat around and went back and totaled it up, and I was like, holy smokes, I didn't ever realize. So you don't think about it. You're always on to the next interview, and that's part of the kind of the glory of the book for me, is that it is just on to the next interview. I often didn't listen to my interviews back because I'm busy preparing the next ones and recording them or doing live or whatever it might be. And that's why going back and looking at the transcripts, John, was a lot of fun because because I had really, to be honest with you, forgotten about much of it. Like the Jesse Marsh, Randy Waldrum interview that's in the book about set pieces. That's from 2016 when Jesse was with the Red Bulls. He's come a long way since. Yeah. But I've been a commentator at that time for New York City FC, Jesse was so kind, and I went to practice once a week because it was closer to my home than the New York City training was. And the one thing I noticed in watching his teams play was how good and organized they were on set pieces. Randy Waldron was the coach at Notre Dame, the women's side. I was the women's coach at Rutgers. His set pieces were better than any I'd been against as a coach.
Right.
So I brought both of them on together. They agreed to, and that's how that one came together. So you never know how it's going to happen.
Yeah, that's good. No, and you did say in the book there, when you're talking about all the interviews you've done, when you went back and looked at them, you said, wow, that's some really good stuff.
Yeah, some of it I wish I had remembered or known when I was actually coaching more on a full-time basis. I could have utilized it, but that's the pleasure. That's the privilege of the show, and I think it's the book. I'm not on here trying to sell the book, but the thing that has really resonated with the feedback is that coaches I trust who are not going to tell me anything oh, Glenn, you're great. I'm not getting any of that from a majority of my friends. It's going to be like, oh, Glenn, you really missed it here. But the overwhelming response has been coaches should read this book. And I think the reason why, and the reason I thought that too while I was writing it, is that every interview has a nugget or two in there that we might be able to pluck out. Maybe not. Maybe there's some interviews you'll never even read because you go like, I don't, I'm not going to go there. But that's the choice, and that's the choice of the show. I might have a guest on one week. It's like, nah, I don't need that, or I'm not interested. And then the next week it's someone who you're really enthralled with and you want to hear. So that's the way we operate, right, John?
Yeah, no, for sure. And I mean, even with our own Behind the Bench webinars, we've been at this since 2020. And sometimes I'll go back and look at them and say, wow, there's some really good stuff here.
Yeah.
But you'll notice if you look at all our Behind the Bench webinars, we've actually interviewed quite a number of authors. And every time an author comes, I'm the guy doing the hosting. And that's because I'm partly retired. I have more time than the others. But it seems like when we offer the book to some of our other hosts, they don't have the time, they're coaching. And it's a sad thing because I think books are there forever. I'm looking at some films that I did when I was in university, Super 8 films, and the quality goes down. You don't have a projector to I digitize them. You can put them on a computer, but how long is that medium going to last? Where the USB cable is any good, but the book, they've lasted for thousands of years. So I think it's a great idea to put it down, and even though people might not be reading it, it's always there. Yeah. Someone could go look back at any time. And the one thing that I noticed about your book, because how did you take 1,200 interviews, and even like, for example, you had a Jesse you were talking about, or Bill Beswick or whatever. We'll get to some of those later, but each interview is probably an hour, and yet you only have maybe 2 pages, 3 pages, 4 pages on each. Well, so how did you decipher all that?
The most difficult part of writing the book. Now, I'm writing it, so I'm writing introductions and little anecdotes as to how I, came about doing the interview, which I think is interesting. How, some of these people. Some of the people in my books are friends that I've grown to know over the years, just colleagues, friends, or friends and then colleagues, whatever order it was. Yeah. I've become great friends with people I didn't even know until I interviewed them. We just connected, and it's really been wonderful that way. But I just know that I get the opportunity to break it down. And everybody's got a little different way to do it, John, and I think that's the attractive part of this too. I mean, you could look at every one of these interviews and it might be, some of it's about mindfulness and psychology, and some of it's leadership, some of it's culture, some of it's X's and O's. It's all over the place, but it's, narrowing it down was really tough. The simple answer is it was really tough narrowing down the subjects. Right. That is the people. and then to go back and read all the transcripts and then figure out what I think was most, would most resonate. And some I get feedback from these interviews. So the ones that got a lot more feedback than others, those are in here too, because
Gotcha.
to me, that's what the people listening wanted to hear. So,
Right.
so I got them in there too.
So some of the interviews I thought that you mentioned were very interesting. And then I said, okay, I'd like to find out more, or maybe even listen to the interview. Can someone go back and find it anywhere? And how would they do that?
Yeah, it's a SiriusXM FC interview. SiriusXM is behind a paywall. It's available in the States and in Canada. And I've dated the interviews in the book. And what you can do is go on the app, because one thing the SiriusXM, it's been very nice of them to do, is put even the older, very older ones, put them back on the app so you can look them up and listen back to them. So that's the best case scenario. If somebody's from the UK or Germany or whoever else might be, on the call or ultimately viewing this or listening to this, you have to have had a subscription, paid for one in America. And then if you move to Germany, you could still listen to it on the app. So simply put, you need a subscription, and you get the app for free, and that's where some of these live. Otherwise, no. And again, that goes back to the sadness, the lamenting I had back with my wife, which kind of was the stimulus for all this.
Right. Okay. So that's good to know. So they can find it somewhere if they want to see more. Okay, let me just bounce around. So you kind of alluded to it, how you broke the book down. You have different sections based on different parts of the game or things that you wanted to talk about. You want to explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so coming up with the chapter names, I'm just going to turn to it so that I just tried to, and volume 2 is coming and volume 3 is coming. So I'm including, there's going to be different subject areas and chapters in there. So coaching with purpose. So like Emma Hayes kicks off the book. She's just an absolutely fantastic woman who highly intelligent and guiding our U.S. women's national team, and to come in to a team that was a bit wrecked, they emotionally not stable, for a team of that ilk who'd been number one for a long time. Just a couple of months later, they won the gold medal at the Olympics, which was no easy task. So she's really done a remarkable job. And the second interview is Mikey Varish, one of the top young coaches in Major League Soccer. They won the West Division in their expansion year last year. Then Renee Mullenstein, who sat next to Sir Alex Ferguson for 7 years at Manchester United and developed and conducted every training session. So what he did is he kept the whole, he kept all those sessions, in his file, wherever that is, and he made a book. So I brought him on after he wrote the book, and he's one of the guys I've become very close with. And now he's the assistant coach for Iraq, and they just qualified for the World Cup for just the second time ever, the first time in 40 years. And it's really a remarkable story there as well. But beyond that, resilience, that's kind of the mental toughness. I try to be creative with the chapter titles. What holds a team together? Well, that's the culture. That chapter is kicked off by James Kerr, who's not a soccer guy, but he was embedded with the All Blacks, the New Zealand national rugby team, which arguably is the top team ever competing in a team sport. And a lot of that is based on their culture. And he goes really into that in a book called Legacy. And it goes on and on. Jesse's in the specialist chapter, specialist meaning I've got a throwing coach. He was the Liverpool throwing coach under Klopp. I've got a guy who's a substitution coach. He studies that aspect for the timing of the substitutions, but also how you deal with the substitutes so that they are at their peak and most effective, when they enter the game. There's all kinds of stuff in here, man.
Yeah, that was interesting one, that substitute. Never expected that there'd be a substitute coach.
Me either.
Yeah.
But I met him on Sammy Lander. I met him on LinkedIn. So, yeah, the way find people, and I would say this, John, and I think you're probably of the same makeup, because as you know, as coaches, you have to have this. But I think in life, so Chris Brady is in the book. He co-authored Carlo Ancelotti's Quiet Leadership. And and at the end, if you read the last paragraph of that interview, we go away from Ancelotti. Well, not really away from him, but this guy Brady is involved in researching the last 150 years of coaching in England. So I asked him, is there anything that's like, is there an overriding, is there a singular thing that just really stands out over the years for those who have been most successful? And it was 2 words: intellectual curiosity. And I think the intellectual part you should eliminate from me, but I am a curious person. And I think the curiosity is what leads to me finding all these different people, and like a throwing coach and a substitution coach.
Yeah, that was interesting. And that chapter there, which is over there around page 240 towards the end, is there's some interesting points that was made. So definitely, I think for viewers, you wonder, a book that's got all these things, there's so many little things that you can apply to your own game if you're coaching, just from some of the quotes and some of the ideas that come through this book. So I do highly recommend it.
The guy in that same chapter is specialist. His name's Gair Jordet. Now, the way I met him is through Ronnie Dyla. They're both Norwegian. Dyla was the head coach of New York City FC. And he talked about this guy that had come in and done some vision training, not the training so much, but he's done a lot of research on vision. Like, he's come up with things, Erling Haaland scans 6 times every 10 seconds, which puts him in, we understand his physical attributes and how he scores goals, but it's really amazing how he scores sometimes when, why aren't they defending him? But he's constantly figuring out where his best position can be to receive, finish, things like that, which is why sometimes you find him, alone at the back post. It's the work off the ball, but it's a scanning. So he scans 6 times every 10 seconds, which is the same as Xavi in the midfield for Barcelona during his time. But the interesting part about Gair Jordet that I took from this chapter is penalty kick shootouts. He's written a book called Pressure, and every coach should read it. And you might not apply some of the things that he puts in there, but Ronnie Dyla, I went back and talked to him. New York City won 2 penalty kick shootouts en route to the MLS Cup in 2021, beat Portland on the road in penalties to win it all. And there's one thing I noticed when I was watching the penalties, and the New York City players, how everybody's at the halfway line. Well, the New York City players were about 5 yards, maybe 5 steps inside the line, toward the goal that they were shooting at. Yeah. And the referee let them. And I asked Ronnie later, I said, that was interesting. What was that all about? And he said, and he got it from Gair Jordet. And what it was, he goes, it means we're bossing the field. It shows that we're bossing the field. So how about that little intricacy, And so again, those are the nuggets.
Yeah, no, and in the penalty kicks, penalty kicks, it was, I guess, in the same area there where some coaches maybe don't practice it as much. And then the quote was, I forget who said it. You might remember. Because the reason was the pressure. You can't recreate the pressure,
right,
of a real penalty kick at a practice field, and so why bother? Is kind of what I think you asked the question, and the answer from I forget which author, which person.
Gair Jordet, the same.
Was it basically said? Well, would you expect a doctor in ER? We're not going to practice or pilot or whatever, all these stressful situations. I thought that was quite interesting. So,
well, the other thing too that he's discovered, again, and he's a research-based guy. He's a soccer guy, but it's all based on empirical study. So he said, you can't completely recreate, 80,000 people, 40,000 of them yelling things that, it just, you can't recreate that penalty kick shootout, scenario. But he said, if you do something in training that adds even a slight amount of pressure to the person who's taking the kick, that at least somewhat replicates what they're going through. And he says that's helpful. So his research is coaches that do that and coaches that don't, and you'll find some coaches are very stubborn. They're just like, and some of them have had success. Wilfred Nancy, when he was at Columbus, we're not going to talk about Celtic, but when he was at Columbus, he told me they don't work on it at all. And he lets the players choose who's taking the penalties. I'm like, really? But they also won the penalty kick shootout that I was referencing to him at the time of my interview with him. So there you go.
Yeah. Well, I think the Italian national team needs some help with PKs.
They should all be reading that book, man. He has interviewed a bunch of players, and that's part of that that book is players and what they've been through and what they have to offer. So players and coaches should all read that book. I mean, to me, it's like must reading.
Right, and you do reference all the books that I guess people have written and that you've interviewed. So that's all in the back. Again, we're talking to Glenn Crooks, who's the author of Put It On Frame, and it's a collection of stories and strategies from some of the top soccer coaches and experts that he's interviewed in over 1,200 interviewed on the radio. All right. I just want to go one more thing because you're talking about Jesse Marsh and who's the other guy he was with?
Randy Waldrum, who's Notre Dame coach, and I think I have the sense he'll be coaching professionally again. He used to coach the Dash. He's been on the women's side, Nigerian national team coach. He's a great coach. So right now, I think he's still at Notre Dame, but his son is kind of taking over there. So we'll see him somewhere, I think else.
Yeah. So he mentioned, I think they were talking set plays, him and Jesse in that interview, and he mentioned with especially the women's, he likes to have on corners, defending corners. He likes to have a player on both posts. Now, I've always wanted a player at both posts. And I know in today's game, you don't see that as often. And sometimes you see him at one post.
Right.
But I can certainly reference one particular game when Canada's national team, and I happened to be in the U.S. at the time, actually doing a camp, played the U.S. national team. And I believe it was semifinal of the World Cup, I think. And it was a very controversial game, if you remember, when our keeper held the ball too long, and the referee. It's the only time in my life I've ever seen that play called, and then they end up scoring. But in the same game, the U.S. scored a goal off a corner where had Canada had a player at the posts, they wouldn't have scored. Now you've coached in the women's game. Randy seems to think that it's more prevalent to keep players at post. What's your thoughts on that?
I think so. Look, it certainly depends on what kind of numbers are in the area, and it certainly depends on the height and athleticism of your keeper, how much ground they can cover. And generally speaking, a woman's goalkeeper versus a men's goalkeeper doesn't generally, there aren't it seems like in the men's goals these days, it's 6'3", 6'4". You don't see a lot of that in the women's game. There are some. No. So I think you're dealing with two different kinds of athletes, and I've coached women predominantly over the years, and this sometimes this can be construed into no. There are different athletes. Men and women are different athletes, and you have to coach them differently. I mean, that could be probably a 2-hour debate, because some people don't feel that way. Having coached women and men, since 1981, I feel like I'm qualified to understand that there are differences between the two. So I think, and when you see Jesse in that same interview, he was less two at a post, one at either post, and maybe at the front, maybe at the back, depending on how they scouted their opponents. So yeah, I always like two on the posts. But the one thing I would say, John, I don't think you can. There are moments where, we see goals scored, and we all say, men's or women's, and we'll say, if there was somebody at the post, that goal never would have happened. But you know what? That's just one circumstance. You have to take you have to take 100 corner kicks that you've defended and really look at what the best way is for you. One instance like that can't necessarily dictate how you do it. So, I think we have to be careful with that too.
That's true. No question. A couple of other things. There's a quote in there I thought was interesting. Capello, all great coaches are thieves. I don't know if you remember that quote.
Who said that?
I think it was Capello, but you didn't interview Capello. You interviewed someone who worked with him.
Oh, okay.
And that was Capello's quote that you put in the book. All great coaches are thieves. I thought that was.
I've heard.
I think that's true.
No, I don't think I don't know of a coach that didn't steal a little bit from others. It's but what you do with it is the next step. So Pascal Janssen, who I talk to every week for the New York City Football Club, their head coach, it was funny because he was. They've got a game against Vancouver coming up. And Vancouver played a couple of times in CONCACAF Champions Cup, and he's already watching those games in February to get ready for a game that's not until April. Yeah. But he said during my pregame interview, he said, "Yeah, we found out saw a couple of things in there. I'd like to, I'm going to steal, and it's like, but you take it and then you model it to whatever you're doing.
Your players, yeah.
Oh, We've all done that, right, John? You've stolen.
Yeah. Oh, of course. There's Rick Jacobs is the guy that.
Rick.
That you interviewed in that particular quote. I thought that was interesting. Like I said, there's all sorts of great little quotes here that you could use as a coach in your dressing room to make a point. Anson Dorrance, I thought, had quite a lot of things to say. And one of them is he did say, "Put it on frame." I thought maybe you stole the title from his interview.
No, I didn't.
You said you didn't. Okay.
We're in compatico with our phrasing sometimes. But Anson's now he does have intellectual curiosity because he's an intellect. The guy's got a law degree and then went to coach soccer, which is always very interesting.
Yeah.
Law school to the soccer pitch.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember his interview, but he did talk about ranking players to challenge them. And the one quote he said, which I thought was hilarious, parents always say their kid is not only the best on the team, probably the best in the state and the best in the country.
Yep.
I don't know if you remember your interview with him.
Oh, yeah. Well, what he did, I took a lot from Anson when I was a young coach. And because he had written books. The thing I like about Anson, he's a bit of a polarizing figure. I would say the negative word oftentimes given to him is that he's arrogant. But I've become very close to him, and he's a funny guy, man. And he carries himself very confidently, and why not? He's kind of one of our geniuses in the game, okay? So what he did, and he did this in particular in the spring, and what he would do is he would develop a ranking system like you suggested there, and he did it based on competitive games. It could be 4v4, it could be 11v11, or 1v1, it could be juggling, whatever it is. He made everything competitive, and then he would rank the players based on their results from 1 to, let's say there's 22, 1 to 22, and he would post it weekly. So what he was setting up is the number 22 person's like, man, I got to get the hell out of here. So now she's putting maybe more into training that week. And then the number 1 person is trying to keep the number 1. The number 2 obviously wants to get to number 1. Number 10, they feel like they can get in the top 5. So he called it the competitive cauldron, and it really developed a mentality. And then that carries over into the fall season. But what it is he set up a tradition of players coming into that program and competing. And the other side of this, John, which it gave me a chuckle, is he used data a lot, not just in the spring, but in the fall. He had a manager and whose full-time responsibility was to collect data. What it could be times lost, the number of times you lost possession in this part of the field, whatever it might be. So when a player came into his office and wondered why she wasn't maybe playing more, or I'm not understanding what the issue is, he would oftentimes take this graph and place it right in front of whoever that player was. And the way he put it to me is that he goes, I don't have to tell the player that she sucks. The paper right there, the graph right there says it. And the reason he used it that way is because he understood the sensitivity of the player, coaching men, coaching women, maybe the difference there. And this is where he was genius. For me, coaching women predominantly on the collegiate level, to think about how you explain or criticize the player. I think that should be done with men and women. I think you should always be sensitive to both sexes with that sort of thing. But in particular on the women's side, where if you go after them, a lot of times you'll lose them for a certain period of time. So it was, to me, it was brilliant.
So for those of you who don't know, Anson coached at the collegiate level. Was national champion numerous times.
22.
22.
Well, listen to this. At the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, where Dean Smith, the basketball coach, he's the legendary figure there, along with Anson. But they're basketball. So I remember, and Dean Smith is no longer with us, but in an interview when he was still alive, somebody said, "Yeah, what do you think about this being a basketball school?" And he went right to the reporter and said, "We're not a basketball school. We're a soccer school. That guy's got 22 national championships." So it's kind of funny.
Right. And then he ended up coaching the U.S. national women's team to World Cup victories, I believe.
Yeah,
right?
91, the very first Women's World Cup, he was the coach. That was the only year he was that's the only World Cup he was in. It was the very first one in China. And he's part of those are the pioneers, man. The silent triggers, those girls, because they flew back from China and nobody knew it.
Yeah.
There's so little reporting back then, and the women's game had not been built to the extent it is now. No parades, nobody. And I'm saying nobody was at the airport when they landed. Now they have a ticker tape parade.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that was the start of for the women's game when I think 99 when the U.S. won it in front of like 100,000 people. I think that was a big turning point. All of a sudden, every young girl said, "Hey, I want to play in front of big crowds like that." And I think for females, it wasn't, except for maybe tennis, you don't get big crowds until that time, and then now it's exploded. I mean, you're seeing big crowds, in WSL. You see them in England's first division women's. It's really exploded. So
well, the expansion team Denver, who's coached by a good friend of mine, the former New York City coach Nick Cushing. So he went from the men's, he was at Man City Women, then came to New York City as an assistant for the men, then became the head coach of the men, and now he's the head coach back with the women with Denver. 63,000 at Mile High Stadium, which is where the Denver Broncos play in the NFL, which is an all-time record crowd. But just quickly, just to back to the women's game for a moment as far as big crowds, the first really significant crowd was 1995, the Olympic final.
Right, Atlanta, right?
And it was in Athens because I was just in Atlanta for 10 days. My alma mater is the University of Georgia in Athens, Sanford Stadium, between the hedges. That's what they call it. It's a football school. Okay, that is a football school. No one will ever deny that. But the women's final won by the U.S. Mia Hamm and the rest. 1995, 70,000 people watched that game.
Wow. Yeah. It's come a long way. And I noticed that when I was in Kansas, they practically built their own stadium, the new NWSL Kansas team, and they have almost packed audiences all the time. I mean, it's a nice smaller stadium.
Yeah.
But the people that are investing in the women's game, it's I believe the NFL quarterback there. What's his name for Kansas?
Uh,
Mahomes.
Yeah, Patrick Mahomes. Yep.
Mahomes or his wife is one of the owners, and you're getting people
Yeah.
investing in the women's game, which is great for women's sports.
Well, there's somebody in the book, Karina LeBlanc, who is in this Put It On Frame, and Karina is she's one of the special women in the game. Those in Canada, I'm sure, know that name.
Yeah.
100 caps for the Canadian women.
Yeah.
She's now working in Portland. She's got an elevated position overseeing the Portland Sports Commission. I don't know the exact title. She was the general manager of the Portland Thorns, but most importantly, she was my assistant coach for 4 years at Rutgers. And that's where I got to know Karina. And she's offered some wonderful things. In fact, pretty interesting. And this is part of the Q&A with her in the book. Is John Herdman joined the Canadian women while Karina was still the goalkeeper, and she came back from his first national camp, and she goes, "Glenn, you got to get a hold of this guy. You got to study this guy. He's unbelievable."
Yes.
And it was pretty interesting.
Yes, we've heard that about John. He's, I think he actually changed the game a lot here in Canada. One of the first teams he had was the U19 team, and I think they played in the final of the U19 FIFA World Cup in Edmonton, almost 50,000 people. And after that, the women's game just took off, and John had a lot to do with that. And then, of course, he switched to the men's side, which a lot of people weren't so sure about.
Sure.
But, he got us in the World Cup in 2022.
You got to give him that. You got to give him that. Sometimes John says things he shouldn't, publicly, but I think that it's hard to argue with what he can bring to a team. And what Karina points out in the book is just how that team, it was all about the country, and he did such a good job from a leadership standpoint of making everybody believe and that they were the ones representing the women in that country, and how important it was for how they carried themselves, all the different things. And I think he did the same thing with the men, got them thinking, like, look, no one thinks we're going to do anything here. Let's get it done.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I remember talking to Benito Floro, who used to coach before Herdman, and the biggest challenge that they had was getting players who had citizenship, different citizenship besides Canadian, to play for Canada.
Yep.
That was the biggest problem, he told me, and I think John switched that around. And we're seeing players who decided to play for Canada and maybe had options to go play elsewhere. And then the pride that he brought into the women, I think he did that with the men. And we, I think Canada's on its way to becoming, I guess, a world power, but I think we're always going to compete for a World Cup spot.
But now you've got another good motivator, Jesse. Not just a motivator. I mean, he, tactically, he's astute. The way he's got all the different sorts of presses that he can utilize. And I don't know how he's going to manufacture goals, but I know you have him on next week. I'm sure that'll be one of the things you ask him is, where are we getting the goals from, man?
Yeah, he definitely could use a few more goals. I'm here with Glenn Crooks, who is a broadcaster with the New York City FC. He also runs a podcast called The Coaching Academy. Is that right?
Well, it's not a podcast. It's a radio show. But
that's a radio show. Okay, is that a daily? Is it
everybody
daily?
just calls it everybody calls everything a podcast.
A podcast.
This is the radio, man. I'm a radio guy. I was on the radio coming out of college from 1980 to 1988, the full-time sports director at WDHA in Jersey. And in the midst of that, I started coaching, and then I decided to coach full-time. So for the next, I don't know how many years, 25 years, I was coaching, and then I got back into broadcasting with this SiriusXM FC show in New York City FC. So, yeah, it's been interesting.
So that you can only get it on a SiriusXM. You can't get it on your regular sports radio network, or
SiriusXM FC is a satellite radio.
It's a satellite radio. Okay,
it's a subscription service, available in Canada. So, John, you're gonna have to get on it, man.
Yeah. I'll think about it.
All right. Yeah.
But
What's the matter? You have too many stream subscriptions already? Is that the problem?
no, I like listening to regular music when I'm driving. So,
Okay.
and that's usually when I listen to the radio is driving. I don't do much of it. Again, Glenn, he's written a book called Put It On Frame. How can people get the book if they wanted it?
Amazon or Google Books, so there's two outlets for it. It's not in bookstores. And it seems like everybody just gets it off of Amazon, but some people won't use Amazon because they don't like who's running it. So it's now on Google Books too. I don't know if that reflects any, political turmoil in people's brains.
Right.
But those are the two areas, Amazon and Google, if you want the book. And it's, I think, moderately priced, but especially for what you're going to get out of it, And John, I think and again, this is, I try to wait for people to tell me what they think before I express things like this. But another consistent feedback is that nobody's really, they were saying, I've never read a book where there were so many quality people in one book, to where I can boom, and all these different subject areas. And volume 2 is going to go. Volume 2, I'm going to have a goalkeepers chapter. That's
good.
And so I've got 8 or 9 goalkeepers. Some of the just unbelievable coaches and players who share some of their goalkeeper stuff. And I have a special World Cup chapter, which is going to include coaches and players and one member of the media, the deceased Grant Wall, but coaches and players who have been involved in some manner in previous World Cups. And it's just interesting to hear from players who played in the 2000s in the World Cup, or more recently, where Greg Berhalter was our coach in Qatar, our coach meaning the U.S. So I just think that variety in each of these books is going to be a volume 3 too. And we've been talking about the women's game. There are going to be more interviews regarding the women's game, especially as a World Cup chapter there too, when the women are going to Brazil. I'm hoping to cover that one, John. I've never been to Brazil, so I want to go.
That sounds fun.
Yeah.
Let's just jump back to the book for a second. There's a section where you talk about injuries, nutrition, things like that. Some good quotes there. ACL injuries was one thought. Do you remember that conversation?
Very much so, because that was that interview with Holly Silvers Grinelli. Again, how you meet people. My assistant coach went to high school with her in Kearney, New Jersey. Then she moved out west, where she started this. It's called FIFA Plus 11 program, and it's an ACL warm-up. You can't prevent, so we call it mitigating. But she developed this warm-up, and then she's developed all this evidence. She's a physical therapist, and she's been the lead medical person with Major League Soccer for many years. And she's got this warm-up, which is different movements, some with the ball, some without, but it's, again, empirical evidence that there's a decline in ACLs if for 3 times a week you warm up for 20 minutes with this warm-up rather than whatever else you do. Some coaches will do it, some won't. It's especially geared towards women, because women are 6 times more prevalent to have an ACL. Non-contact 80% of the time. So the body structure and the different things you need to do in order to develop certain parts of the body to help mitigate it. Yeah, I never use the word prevention, because there's no such thing as prevention.
Right. And for men, I think it was hamstrings is the number one.
Yeah, that's a bad one. So I've got 2 guests in there. Steve Tastian is one, and Dave Tenney the other. These are 2 of the leading performance coaches globally, but they spend most of their time in the United States. Like Steve was the performance coach at the age of 33 years old at Everton under David Moyes. So that's the kind of experience he has. And then he worked more recently with the U.S. men. But they both address the hamstring issue. And it's, you just have to recognize that the quad muscle can sometimes be an issue with the hamstring
Yeah.
injury. So you have to balance things out, and there's ways to do that, but it takes time.
Yeah. And some interesting quotes. I don't know if you remember where they came from. I thought, Mother Nature is undefeated. Do you remember that one?
Mother Nature is undefeated. I don't know.
179.
179. All right, I've got the
179.
computer. Let me get there real quick.
That is from, I think we're talking about the hamstrings. That's
Steve Pastian. Yeah.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah. So, well, that's where, but that's where that he's talking about recovery there, and that, you have to look at all the different ways. There are nutritionists in that chapter too that, talk about how important certain fluids or whatever it is to help with recovery, but that you can't take shortcuts. So that's the Mother Nature trumps all.
Yeah, and then you went into just a few pages later, probably the same quote: "Protect their love of the game, respect puberty." That was another quote. I think sometimes coaches bypass players because they judge too early, maybe. So protect their love of the game.
No question. I would fall into that category. I'm short, number one. I'm 5'4", but as a young boy, I was definitely shorter and thinner and just than a lot of athletes. I played baseball more than soccer because my town didn't have soccer till I was 14. So,
right.
I was doing other things, but and I think in soccer in particular, I've had a lot of conversations, John, about where we give up on players too early because they're not physically where they're going to be,
Right.
and we're losing technical and tactically efficient players maybe because it's like, oh, they're getting, they're in the midfield and they're getting overrun, and they're 12 years old. So it's something that's been very, very closely monitored. I think more closely monitored in like the last 5 years to make sure we don't, but people are still to win at 12 is still a major, I can't say major enough problem because you're going to take that kid out and put the more physically able child in there so that you can win that game. That's a problem. That's a problem.
Well, especially now and with pay to play, you get a lot of academies, private academies that, they have to advertise people to come and spend the money and spend it with them here in Canada anyhow. And if you're not winning, it's very difficult to attract customers. So
it's such a societal problem. It's just it's tough to tackle because you're talking about a culture versus, why don't they care? How about let's go to Spain and Germany and see what they do with 10, 11, and 12-year-olds and what emphasis they place on winning. I can tell you already, not much. Brazil, creativity before structure. How about creativity before structure? Again, until you're 12 years old. That's why they can get out of jams with 3 defenders because this is what they did.
Yeah.
And then you add structure later. I'm not, it's not perfect, but for me, Canada and the States, we should look at Portugal. Portugal played us off the park. I don't care what anybody says. Portugal played the U.S. men off the park in the second friendly down in Atlanta because they were far more technically comfortable, every single player on the ball, and tactically their movement. So what am I going to do? If I run U.S. soccer, I'm sending somebody to Portugal for 5 years. You can come home every now and then, but for 5 years and watch what's going on with their 8s, 9s, 10s, 11s, and 12s. Would you do that?
Yeah.
And then let's consider it. I just think some people do it better than us, and I think sometimes we're stubborn. And but I'm not. I don't know everything. Believe me, John. And there can be a lot of counter to this. I mean, if we had other people on, they would come back, with something that might also be really, really valuable to what we're doing right now. I get that.
Yeah.
But I always
Well,
like you talked about stealing from coaches. To me, let's steal from other academies. What are
Yeah.
they doing? They're doing something differently. And then the other thing we can't overcome is the culture, because
Yeah.
soccer is not our culture.
Right. And I mean, here,
Hockey in Canada, I always think, and then here in the States, it's football and baseball. But
Yeah.
football, American football, number one by far. Yeah.
Well, here in Canada, well, I'm getting an echo now. Here in Canada, we, the association or the provincial and federal, they've mandated that, we scale the game down 5v5, 7v7, 9v9, and no scores and standings till at least 13 years old. So that's a step in the right direction.
Yeah.
But still, there's that.
And the thing is, they'll keep score in their head.
Exactly. And word gets out with all the parents.
You're not putting up the, on the website. Here's the
yeah. You see it all the time. In academies, if they've won, they put it on, post it on Instagram.
Sure.
If they haven't, it's kind of quiet. But even though there's technically no scores and standings, it's then there's the issue in England, and there's a book that I read. I forget what it's called now. I don't see it here, but it's quite interesting. Oh, here it is. Their situation is different. No Hunger in Paradise is their book, and it's a different situation because players don't have to pay to play over there. Sometimes they get paid at 9 years old to join an academy, so that's a whole different issue. But we're not talking about that book. We're talking about on Frame here, and again, you can get it at Google Books.
But I have, like you said, I have that further reading section. So I just wrote down No Hunger in Paradise. I'll be reading that at some point.
Yeah, it's an eye opener. Let me tell you. And it was Colin Chambers, who runs IPSO, which is International Professional Scouting Organization, and the NSCAC has hosted them here, and we will be bringing him back to run his coaches scouting courses, actually.
Nice.
So another couple of quotes that I really liked here. Again, we're in the nutrition section. We went from injuries, nutrition, and then we went to sleep. And sleep is the cheapest performance enhancer on earth.
That's right, babe.
That's a nice quote.
That probably came from Dawn Scott, and who's a pretty legendary performance figure here, both strength, nutrition. She was with the U.S. women's national team for a long time. She's also worked on the men's side with Inter Miami. The idea there is she was the first one I ever heard do this. The players brought their own pillows on the road because, everybody's, that's stayed in a hotel. The pillows are terrible for the most part, or they're at least they're different than what you're used to. And then when you get to be, I'll just say my age, you wake up with a stiff neck when, if you had your own pillow. But because 8 hours sleep is incredibly important when possible for recovery. And that's when they say cheapest form. You just got to go to sleep. So you have to figure out, but you also have to stay off your electronic devices, maybe at least the hour before you're going to nod off, better 2 hours. And I learned something recently from Matt Freeze, who is the New York City goalkeeper, who is the presumptive number one for the U.S. men. And he played in this last match against Portugal. I interviewed him in front of supporters like 2 weeks ago. And he said that, and he's a Harvard graduate, okay? So he looks at things very calculated, mathematical, science. I mean, he is so he said the most important sleep you get during the week is 2 days before a competition, or as he said, 2 days before a big exam, or 2 days before you're going to show your artwork at a museum. So he was pointing towards every direction of what you might be doing in your life. But in athletics, the most important sleep is 2 days before the competition. And that's his scientific outlook on him being the best that he can be.
Wow. And I tell you what, he made some great saves in that last game that could have made the score worse for the U.S.
Yeah. Well, that
And then-
interview I had with him last week or 2 weeks ago, John, he will be in the goalkeeper section in volume 2 of Put It
Good.
On. Yeah.
Good. You got to get some pictures in the book with you and some
All
of
right.
these
Well,
guests.
I'm going to ask you to subsidize that then, because I've been told I saw the cost of what it might.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Just a black and white picture is.
Well, black and white is cheaper, but black and white doesn't do it for me. So
Okay.
and look, I'm some of this. I'm a first-time author, so I don't have like publishers knocking down their door to get my stuff. So I have to shell out some of the cash to make these things happen.
Okay. No, I didn't realize that pictures were extra. That's too bad.
Massively.
Yeah. Another interesting quote. Divorced parents and elite athletes. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, that's the one where, and this Patrick Vieira shared this with me, and I'm trying to remember exactly where that came from, but I remember equating it to Patrick Vieira, 1998, and France winning the World Cup. And I asked Patrick, he was a New York City coach from 2016 through the middle part of 18 before he left for Nice. And so I wondered about that team. I said, well, what were great players, obviously. But he said the number one reason that we won the World Cup that year is because of all the players that came from adverse backgrounds, let's say. I mean, some it could have been poverty, some it could have been parents were divorced, some it could have been the death of a parent. And he said, in talking to all his teammates, he recognized that they were more resilient in high pressure situations because they were given these things so early in life and had to deal with them. And during their growing up process and then playing soccer and playing it on a high level, he claimed that the tendency was players like that can handle it better. And his recruiting from that point on, when he was involved with teams, he would look for if player A and player B were equal, with all the tools and everything for the position they needed. If one had a little bit more adversity in their life, he would pick that one.
Wow, interesting. Yeah. Wow, so many interesting things in this book. We haven't even gotten to Michael Beale and Bill Beswick, who's in sports psychology. I mean, every time he speaks at the United Soccer Coaches Convention, it's packed. He's got great stories. And Dan Abrams, what can you remember from those guys real quick? Because we are getting on here.
Well, Bill Beswick, there was a quote from there. Let me see if I can find it real quick, how he referred to some things. And, he's the godfather of sports psychology, really. Right. And, and he learned some of it through basketball. And I think that, part of it is players desiring honesty in your feedback. And, I think as young coaches, sometimes we're a little reluctant to be right up front and honest with our players, but there's a way to do that while also understanding that you can put an arm around them at the same time. It's trying to, and you're always trying to add to their game. And I think that's important. That came from Rene Mullenstein, Sir Alex's assistant, when he was coaching Cristiano Ronaldo in his youth. And you couldn't go to Cristiano Ronaldo and say, hey, we need to change this. No, what you said to him is, we want to add to your game. And now they're okay. Yes, let's add. My game's good, but let's add more to it. And I think so. That's psychology too. Now, Rene is not in the psychology section, but he's in the first chapter. But and I can't find that Beswick.
Beswick's page 63.
Yeah, no, I see it
somewhere there.
Remember the quote that I thought was pretty interesting. And Dan Abrams, he has this program with young players, and it's called you're fixated on almost visualizing how you're going to be successful in something, but you do it through written form too. So he has players writing journals, and when part of this is make your bed first, and then get to the breakfast table and then write your, it wasn't goals. And forgive me that I can't remember every single aspect of this, but it was very much, and the thing that stuck out to me is I had a friend whose son did this, and he sent me a picture, which I ended up sharing with Dan, of all the different things that he had written down in his journal that he looks at every day, or it's above his mirror. But he does it religiously, and Enzo, John Rojas' son, has told me it has really helped him. So I share that with Dan, and he's very happy to hear that. He's a guy that will sometimes put things up on LinkedIn that I think are really interesting. For those that aren't on LinkedIn, I'm going to suggest that you get on there. The number of soccer coaches and directors and everybody involved in a game, the number of those there's myriad numbers of people that offer some really excellent stuff. If you're not on LinkedIn, you're missing out on some good coaching material.
Good advice there for all the coaches listening and who will be listening. Again, Glenn Crooks here, and we're kind of getting to the end of the hour. I don't know how much longer you can hang in there, Glenn. I know you took some time out of your day. Been really interesting.
The biggest problem is there were delays in my flight and Uber and everything else, and so I didn't get home till 3 a.m. So, and you know how your body is. You still wake up at 6 or 7, like whatever, and yeah. So I'm good, man.
You're good. It's like the sleep thing we're talking about.
I want to make sure I can form a simple sentence while we're here.
I'm going to ask you a question, personal question. I've been meaning to do this to all coaches. I've been meaning to give a survey as a coach. I'm going to talk about sleep for a second. What night, if there's one night of the week that you don't sleep that well, would it be the night before a game, 2 nights before a game, the night right after a game? What would be your answer to that?
I would say in season, there are no nights. I had 0 nights as a full-time collegiate Division I coach. The number of years I did that, I don't recall. I can't think of a night where I got great sleep. And the reason being, and one of the reasons, and this is my own personal dilemma, and I would handle it better now because of all these thousands of people that I've talked to for my show who offer all these little things that, oh yeah, that would have helped me a lot. The number of times I wake up in the middle of the night because, I've got 20 things on my mind. I've got to meet with 5 players tomorrow. Well, it's not the day before a game, but I've got to meet with 5 players tomorrow. So I'm going over that, those conversations. I have to meet with my administrator, about a budget and the alumni are coming this week. I can't remember, John, and I'm being totally honest. I can't remember sleeping well in season. Out of season, a little bit better. But still, now you're in recruiting a lot, and so some of that's going on in your head.
So in season, there's no particular night.
I'm going to guess that most coaches are going to say something similar. It's like, John, I just don't sleep well.
Okay.
And we need to. I'll tell you, I talked about Ronnie Dyla earlier, and he said this is while he was in New York City after he'd managed for many years in Norway, and and Belgium also. He was so unhealthy. He felt so unhealthy, and he changed his diet. He changed his exercise regimen. And what he told me was, I'm sleeping through the night now. I went, wow. And he said, I feel, and this is the year they won MLS Cup. So, I mean, there may or may not be a correlation, but he took better care of himself mentally. He didn't let things bother him that normally bothered him in the past. And I think those are the lessons I could have learned. But I was out of full-time coaching at that point. So
right, it's a little easier. Anyways, folks, we're going to wrap it up. But there's a whole bunch of other stuff we didn't even get to that he talks about, that Glenn talks about it with some of his people, which is just interesting to read. And I like it that it's it's bits and pieces, so you get the best of everything. Not too many books can take that kind of experience with people you've talked to.
The other thing I like about the book, John, and I fully appreciate you having me on to talk about some of these things, but you can read it in, and sometimes attention span and people don't read books anymore, blah, blah, blah. But this book you can read in pieces. It's not like
Yes.
one full story. You can
Yes.
just read, one Q&A and then put it down for 5 days and then read another one. So it is something that you can just kind of, end your night with. I've told some, just put it in your bathroom, whatever you do. I think it's I'm looking forward to that one day where I'm visiting somebody's house and I go into the bathroom. There's my book right next to the toilet,
Yeah, no, lots of good stuff. Stuff that even I'm not actually coaching a team right now myself, but if I were to, there's a few things in there right off the bat that I would do differently. Just like challenge to get better even on the last day of your career. That's a nice quote. Some signals, forehead sign, make someone feel important. Sidney Crosby even mentioned him. I don't remember what that's about. I'm going to have to go back and look at it. Game face from Dan Abrams. Big expectations is negative for every performance. So many things. It's easier to destroy something than build it. Tactical fouls. Again, we talked about set plays, even throwing, sub coaches, PKs, finishing coaches. So many different quotes that you could use, and in your own coaching, just to add something to it. And so again, Put It On Frame is the name of the book, and this is volume 1. I guess you're going to call it the same, volume 2, or?
Well, I'm going to call it. So you see at the top it says the Crooks Conversations. That's going to be volume 2.
Okay.
And then the Put It On. Actually, I'm looking at covers right now. Put It On Frame 2. We're trying to figure out where to put the 2. I don't know where yet.
Okay.
And there's going to be a second ball in there. Isn't that clever? Like 2 balls. It said
2 balls. Okay, that's
right.
Nice. Yeah, that's good. A little different though, to differentiate it. Different background colors, maybe.
Yeah,
I think
the colors will be a little different, but I want it to have the same
idea,
same look.
Yeah.
And you notice,
very well designed.
See who wrote the forward? Tony Miola, who's one of the best keepers in the history of our game, and Hall of Famer, and has become a good friend, and also hosts shows on SiriusXM FC. But there's a lot of good people involved, and then his interview in the goalkeeper section is what kicks off the next book. So
right,
every
that's going to be interesting, because goalkeepers are a different breed.
Different breed, man. That's why they have their own union, the goalkeeper union, right?
Yes, that's it. All right. Oh, let me just check one more time. Is there any questions from anybody? No questions. Everyone is, I guess, happy with what we're saying. All right, Glenn. So listen, thanks very much for being on Behind the Bench. Maybe when your second book comes out, we can bring you back on.
Let's do it.
And let's enjoy the World Cup, and go Canada, go for me. And for you, it'll be go USA, go.
I'm rooting for Canada too, so I'm with you.
Good. All right. Thanks again, Glenn.
Thanks, John.
Take it easy.